Bureau of Investigation, detectives arrested 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, on a warrant for murder of Ethan, Zana, Madison, and Kaylee.
Just 2 days ago, the defense team of Bryan Kohberger has filed a court document which provides a glimpse into the alibi for Bryan C. Kohberger with regards to he being the main suspect in the Idaho 4 murders. Up until now, Bryan Kohberger had no other explanation of what he was doing at the time of the murders. Kohberger is facing 4 counts of murder for the slaughter of students Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Zana Kenodo, and Ethan Chapin inside a rental house near the Moscow campus in the wee hours of the morning on November 13, 2022. In this video, we are going to show you the court documents, and then we will get into the details of these documents and try to explain as best as we can. I think that this is going to change the trajectory of the case if it's successful, but then if it gets thrown out by the court, then we are still standing at where we are with Bryan C. Kohberger still facing these charges. So without wasting much time, we are getting into the documents and you are seeing them on your screen. I'm going to read it out and we try and then we break it down. So I read, in the District Court of the 2nd Judicial District of the State of Idaho, in and for the County of Later, plaintiff being the State of Idaho versus the defendant in the person of Bryan C. Kohberger, case number CR 29222805. Objection to the state's motion to compel motive of defense of alibi, or alternatively, to bar certain evidence. Comes now, Bryan C. Kohberger, by and through his attorney of record, Ann C. Taylor, public defender, and hereby and objects to the state's motion to compel motive of defense of alibi, or alternatively, to bar certain evidence. Idaho Code 19519 and ICR 12.1 require an alibi disclosure of a specific location with a specific location and witnesses to so testify. By statutory definition, Mr. Kohberger may remain silent yet testify that he was not at 112 King Road, November 13, 2022. However, in an abundance of caution and recognizing the court has authority to exclude witnesses, Mr. Kohberger has indicated he anticipates corroborating witnesses. So this is what is on the first page. Now we go to the second page. Mr. Kohberger has long had a habit of going for drives alone. Often, he would go for drives at night. He did so late on November 12 and into November 13, 2022. Mr. Kohberger is not claiming to be at a specific location at a specific time. At this time, there is not a specific witness to say precisely where Mr. Kohberger was at each moment of the hours between late November 12, 2022 and early morning November 13, 2022. He was out driving during the late night and early morning hours of November 12 to 13, 2022. Counsel for Mr. Kohberger is aware that case law broadens the definitions of alibi with the statutory requirements of a specific location to more broadly include disclosure of information that tends to state the person claiming alibi was at a place other than the location of an offense. Mr. Kohberger has complied to the extent possible at this time. Corroboration of Bryan Kohberger not being at 1122 kin may be brought out through cross-examination of the state's witnesses. At this time, Mr. Kohberger cannot be more specific about the possible witnesses and exactly what they will say. The defense has been hampered by the state's own choices. The state chose a secret grand jury rather than the planned preliminary hearing. Had the state moved forward with the preliminary hearing, the defense would have had the opportunity to develop testimony through cross-examination and witness presentation. Now we go to the third page. Instead, the defense has only received on July 27, 2023, a copy of the testimony the state chose to elicit. Review of such is underway. The defense had to obtain investigative materials from the state's investigative counterparts, the FBI, through an order compelling the state to provide such materials. The state made draft disclosures just 2 weeks ago. The sufficiency of these disclosures is currently being analyzed. Corroboration of Bryan Kohberger not being at 1122 kin may be brought out through expert witness presentation. That analysis is underway. The defense has been diligently working to analyze relevant discovery materials and conduct its own investigation. Notably, the defense had to obtain a court order to receive relevant discovery materials. That delay hampers the defense investigation. The defense acknowledges a vast amount of discovery has been provided. Discovery is received on a nearly weekly basis. The defense reviews and acts on the discovery as quickly as possible, including making appropriate supplemental requests for discovery. The state's motion is an attempt to force the defense to open its work product files and let the state peek inside. The defense has stated all that can firmly be stated at this time. This is not trial by ambush from the defense. This is the defense requesting information as quickly as possible, yet in some instances face the delay of requesting a court order to obtain information. The state continually uses those opportunities to attempt to force a waiver of speedy trial. That is a decision left to Mr. Kohberger and Mr. Kohberger alone. Mr. Kohberger was out driving alone. Corroborating evidence may come from cross-examination of state's witnesses. Corroborating evidence may come from presentation of defense experts. Mr. Kohberger is aware of and will comply with his continuing duty to disclose information. The court may exempt Mr. Kohberger from further inquiry. Mr. Kohberger requests such an exception at this time. Continuing inquiry at this juncture, delves into his case investigation as well as protected work products. In support of an exemption, Mr. Kohberger is prepared to provide further detail in an ex parte hearing with the court. And the document is dated 2nd day of August 2023 and is signed off by Ann Taylor, Public Defender, Assigned Attorney. Certificates of delivery are hereby certified that a true and correct copy of the foregoing was personally served as indicated below on the 2nd day of August 2023, addressed to Later County Prosecuting Attorney via email. So this is the motion that has been filed by Kohberger's defense team. Now, some are saying that this is smart. Some are also saying that this is a stalling technique. But if you look at what they are saying, It's basically trying to imply that prosecution would have to prove that Bryan Kohberger was actually there at the crime scene at that time. Because according to the defense, they have evidence to show that Bryan Kohberger was out driving. But then he was not at a specific point because he likes to go out for long drives. So he was driving in the late hours of November 12th into the early dawn hours of November 13th, which would probably put the time of the crime occurrence within that time frame. So it's as though if it can't be proven that Kohberger was at the crime scene, that justifies the alibi they are presenting. That is how I understand it. You can correct me if I'm misinterpreting, but this is my 2 cents, not a legal interpretation. I think that in this, they are trying to imply that the onus is on the prosecution or the state's prosecution to actually provide evidence that corroborates that Bryan Kohberger was at the crime scene at that specific time the crimes occurred. Other than that, they also have alibi which exonerates him of that because he was out driving but not at a specific part of town anywhere. So it's more like prove I'm there. If you can't prove I'm there, then I could have been anywhere because I like driving. And I was driving I was taking long drives, so I could have been driving at anywhere at that time if you can't prove I was actually there. In a way, I think it sort of makes sense in a way. It's more like the egg and the hen, which one came first? That is per my common sense. I don't know how it plays out vis-a-vis the law of that state. But it's going to be interesting times ahead because per what they are saying that he was on a solo drive on the night of the murders, but they can't actually say specifically where he was at the time. Now, let's take that statement and try to broaden it and see the possibilities as to how that conversation can go. First, I'm sure wherever he drove to, or at least most of the places he drove to, would have some form of cameras around, at least on the streets. So, looking at the timeline involved, if they are able to establish the routes he was driving through or he was driving on, then they could have a means of possibly confirming if indeed he was driving at that time, however long that drive was. He should have passed by some cameras, he should have got caught by some traffic lights and all. Traffic cams could have captured him. So there should be something. Unfortunately, Kohberger's phones were off at the time of the incident, per reports. So I don't know if cell phone towers will still be able to get the ping as and when he crosses them, because if that is possible, then it will be easily possible for them to also establish where he went. The cell phones will give a trajectory of his whereabouts at the time. Then again, it might not also be ironclad because even with that, the cell phones could be with somebody. It's possible. I'm not saying it was, but there's the possibility somebody can give his phone to someone to go round so that the cell phones will divert in a different direction, but he, the owner of the phones, will be somewhere else because he doesn't have his phone with him. So I'm not sure how this strategy that they are bringing will play out. His lawyer had actually explained that Mr. Kohberger has long had the habit of going on long drives. Yes, but is that also an established habit that people can corroborate to? And even if they can, how does that also imply that on that fateful night he was actually on those drives? So it's going to be an interesting thing. And I don't know if the court will accept this. And I'm sure they will also try to either strengthen their stance or corroborate it based on what the state witnesses will come and say. And I'm sure they are going to push it in the direction of trying to get the state witnesses to convince the court and the jurors as to what actually puts Bryan Kohberger at the crime scene, aside the evidence of the sheath of the knife, which allegedly had his DNA on. Because in the absence of that, I'm yet to find any other thing that puts Kohberger at the crime scene. In my previous video talking about the survivors of this gruesome murder of the Idaho 4, I was talking about the fact that the real test is what will play out in court. And until then, the case is still wide open, although the police believe they have their man. Because in court, a lot of things can change. Even during the proceedings, new evidence can come out which can change the trajectory of the case and even the narrative thus far. And I think that this motion submitted by Kohberger's defense team is very, very strategic, tactical, and very technical as well. If it turns out that this motion stands and the prosecution is unable to convince the court strongly that Kohberger was at the crime scene, and the defense is able to convince the court that he was not there at the crime scene and that he had been going on one of his long drives, then the case could be falling apart or may be falling apart. I don't know. These are just my thoughts. I'm no legal expert. But I think that the prosecution has its work cut out for him, and so does his defense team, because some of the evidence against Kohberger are quite huge. They are quite astonishing, and the defense team have their work cut out to turn the tide in favor of Bryan Kohberger. I'm following this case, like I said, and I'm bringing you updates as and when they are due. There is also rumors out there that some people are suspecting that maybe the object found at the crime scene with Kohberger's DNA was planted. That has not yet been confirmed. But there are so many theories out there. Kohberger has also been silent all this while, up until this point where his defense team have presented this motion. So what is going to happen if Kohberger is even asked to take the stand? What do you think is going to happen? Let me know in the comment section. With whatever he says, how are they going to corroborate it? Is that going to trigger another form of investigation? What if there are other people involved? What if Kohberger turns out to even be innocent? I'm not saying he is or he isn't, but what if they are not able to prove the alibi? What will be the next action of the police and the prosecutors? This case, I'm sure, is going to travel quite a distance, and it might be a bumpy journey for both the prosecution and the defense team, and also for us, the general public, observing from within the state, within the country, and on the international level. And I think that at the end of the day, I hope justice is actually found for the Idaho 4, because the manner in which they had to go was just so gruesome. I also don't know if the two survivors are going to be called to the stand, especially Dylan Mortensen, who claims to have seen the killer face to face, although he had a mask that covered his nose and mouth. I don't know if she's going to be called to the stand. I don't know if the other person too, Bethany Funk, is also going to be called to the stand, although she is not reported to have seen anything. She has agreed not to be called to the stand by allowing herself to be interviewed by the defense team out of state. So I don't know how these things are going to play out. The case is still in court, but I think that this motion, as has been filed by Kohberger's defense team, is going to change the narrative. It's going to change the prosecution's strategy, most likely. And it allows Kohberger's defense team to present potential witnesses to corroborate an alibi during the trial. So we are waiting to see. And at the moment, Kohberger's legal team is sifting through evidence and searching for potential witnesses who can back his whereabouts the night of the quadruple murder. Imagine what will happen if they are able to find some. Imagine. And the defense team has stated that That is all that can be firmly stated at this time. So, like I said, bumpy days ahead for both the prosecution and the defense team, and for those of us following the case. But notwithstanding, I'm following the case, as and when any updates are available, I'll bring them to you. Until then, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button, leave your comments in the comment section, like the video. Let's have a discussion. Do you think there's a possibility Kohberger will be exonerated, or you think something else will play out? Let me know in the comment section. We'll catch you next time. Stay safe out there.